Hello and welcome to a discussion of the film Union with its directors and producers, Brett Story and Steve Mang. My name is Stephen Bognar. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and it's my great honor to be here to talk about this film, this amazing documentary, Union, which tells the story of bringing a union to the Amazon Fulfillment Center on Staten Island, something that many people thought would be impossible. This film chronicles 3 years, an intense, supremely suspenseful 3 years in the efforts of a ragtag group, a scrappy team of organizers who are brilliant, but are doing it on their own to bring sort of better conditions to the hardworking folks at Amazon fulfillment centers around the country. The film is almost too, it sort of goes places that I would not have guessed a documentary could go. My late partner, Julia Reichert, and I made a film called American Factory. And we struggled for years to get inside the union effort to bring a union to this factory in Ohio. And we just couldn't get places where Brett and Steve, your film goes to inside situations and rooms and discussions and arguments I'm just in awe of how you and your team were able to get in there. It's just amazing. Uh, this is the film. Julia Reichert always wanted to make a film about the true inside of a union campaign, how hard it is, how many choices you face. And you two have done that. And it's just a remarkable, amazing achievement. The film premiered at Sundance last January, and it has been around the country, around the world ever since. However, it has not gotten, as many of us know, it has not gotten picked up by a major distributor. And that speaks not only that speaks to our times in which rich people can just buy newspapers and quash presidential endorsements. Steve, as you mentioned in your recent interview on the Marketplace show, it's just like we live in such upside down times. And this film, for me, gave me so much hope that we can keep fighting, that working people can have a better deal. We have to organize, we have to strategize. It's going to be it's going to seem impossible on many days, but we can do it. I wondered though, in the 3 years of filming, you must have had days when you felt the film would be impossible. Like what are we doing and why are we so what have we gotten ourselves into? Can you reflect on one, like pick a day or pick a night when you really felt like, man, what are we doing and how are we going to make this into a movie?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll just start by saying thank you so much. We're here because of the work you and Julia have done, and there's no overstating how influential it's been on us as filmmakers and artists and just human beings in the world. So we love you and Julia, and we miss her dearly. Yeah, like thank you for that incredible introduction. I think there was a night, we were probably, gosh, into day 100 of the organizing campaign where the real sort of intense period where things were coming to a fevered pitch, organizers were, being retaliated against, and they were staying at the tent every night and through all weather. And so Martin DeCicco and I would trade off at that point in the camera duties, and it was often also back-to-back nights. So I was exhausted. I went to the car to just take a nap for like 15 minutes, and I could not even imagine how or when this film would come to an end. Just as you were describing, I mean, it just seemed really insurmountable, feeling like we had to make something that was beyond sort of this idea of win or lose and capture the experience that they were going through. And then, sort of out of this stupor of this nap, I heard the screaming, and the tent was flying like a mile high, and bars were moving through the air. And it was the moment you see in the film where the hurricane takes the tent away. And I just remember feeling like, oh my gosh, we are in such a deep moment where our relationship to the organizers was far more profound than just making a film, right? We were on this journey with them now. And yet, our central task, our main objective was to memorialize everything that would be meaningful to convey this movement that had not ever been given any attention, right? And dismissed for many months along this campaign. But, when you think about it in the grand scale, like minority workers, people of color, for decades have been disempowered. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have to help them. But I reverted to this thing we learned where just you have to hold the shot for like 12 seconds. So I run out. I didn't even have the consciousness to focus it, held it for 12 seconds, and then walked over and said, you guys are okay. Do you need any help? And Josiah was very pleasant in the joking that manner, but it really kind of spoke to this feeling of like
Mhm.
how messy and intense this kind of like engagement gets when we're going on this journey with the filmmakers.
Absolutely. And it speaks to you're a human being and you're a documentarian and you have to do your job, but you can't, there comes a moment when you have to be the human first and not the camera person, not the cinematographer. I love that moment in the film. You feel the border between, you know, or whatever that is, that fourth wall just collapse as the tent is collapsing, and it's sort of it's a very powerful scene in a film full of powerful scenes. I was reviewing the film. I've seen it like three times now. I love the film, but there's like a handful of scenes about 35 minutes into the film that just uh, play off each other in such a beautiful way. The first is when Natalie, the older organizer, is talking to Madeline about she says something so funny, and Madeline's face is so revealing. Natalie says, "Oh, I take one look at you, and I say, oh yeah, you went to college." And Madeline, the younger organizer, does like I feel flashing across her face is this feeling like I don't want to accept that. I really don't. And it sort of speaks to class dynamics and family history, and it's so visual. It's just cinematic. And then there's a scene of Chris driving and reflecting, and it's quiet, and it introduces a musical thread in a film where your use of music is so restrained and so smart. So many documentaries pour music over everything, and it's just so sad to me. Breaks my heart because it just ruins. It's like pouring syrup over a beautifully crafted, croissant or something. It's like your use of music is brilliant throughout the film, and in this one scene, as Chris is driving at night, you introduce a theme, and then Chris reflects on where he's at and how hard it's been, and then the third scene in this sort of sequence is again Natalie and Madeline and a white male organizer whose name I forget. They're talking about, well, Chris could get arrested. Chris could get arrested and he could be killed. Oh, well, that's what Dr. King did. Well, yeah, and Natalie says, well, yeah, and look what happened to him. And we're really talking about like putting Chris Smalls putting his life on the line, and is that what it takes? And you're really putting us in that scene because you're not giving us a clear answer. Yes, Natalie's right, but in a way, we wonder like, well, yeah, Dr. King did put his life on the line too. These scenes just play off each other so beautifully, and they all are like, within the larger battle, there are these reflective scenes that builds suspense in quiet ways. It just invests us into character more and builds tension in a way. But it made me think, well, how your editing room must have been full of amazing moments like this that reveal the themes and at the same time the characters, like deepen our relationships, our bonds with people. I use characters in quotes here, but it's like build bonds with us and are caring for the people. I mean, how many other scenes did you have to not include and then how did you come to choose these scenes that create these powerful sequences?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a great question, and it's great to hear you talk about those scenes because it speaks to, I think, something that was important to us from the very beginning. We started making this film out of an interest in sort of showing and witnessing in real time what it might be like, not just to be organizers, because these weren't even really organizers yet. They were people who were becoming politicized and figuring out what that even means. And there were very few indications that they would even get to an election, let alone win an election. So we had to understand, and I think we did from the very beginning, why it would be valuable to watch them go through this journey, regardless of the outcome. And so we were always very attentive to, um, like how the film was going to necessarily work through these moments, these really quiet moments in which we see people coming into a particular kind of being, a new kind of being, a political kind of being, and not doing it on their own by themselves, but together in in a group context, in a group context where they're also dealing with a lot of kinds of differences. So they're excited about being together. They're at the tent in part because they're finding something in each other. I mean, it's a sense of purpose, a sense of recognition, maybe some friendship. But then there's also this tremendous difference that like nobody really knows how to articulate. So we were really interested in that while we were filming. And then, of course, as you know, the edit room is a whole other thing because you have to battle especially when you've been, on the scene with a group of people that you've come to care about, you have to relook at your own footage and ask, wait a second, like everything that I think this footage is saying, is that just my memory of the moment? Is that my desire for what it's going to communicate? How, even if I think it does communicate these things, how is that going to play to an audience that's maybe read some newspaper articles about this story and has their own ideas? So, we had the privilege of working with some really brilliant editors and a large team. Steve and I are co-directing together, and we're in the edit room alongside two other editors, Blair McClendon and Malika Zuri Worrell. And these are editors that are also very interested in the political questions that we're asking and in a film that can, you know, surpass just sort of like, plot structure, that can do character in a different way than just, here's three types of people and here are the ways in which they have different trajectories. Like really interested in how we learn what people are like in the real world, which is to just observe them behaving and often behaving in relation to each other. Like I also love that scene with Natalie and Maddie because for precisely the reason you say, Maddie is surprised that Natalie has clocked that she's of a different class. I think that like ideas of class are also things that some people think about and other people don't because of class. And that was really an important theme for us, thinking about not just how hard and what it's like to organize, but all the forces that are, mobilized against a group like this. And those forces are sometimes external, like a big company with a lot of money who's hiring union busters. And sometimes they're so built into the fabric of everyday life that we don't even know how to talk about them. And that's, I think, how race and class and gender actually work. So it was like an exciting challenge and a real challenge in the edit room to figure out how to let the film communicate through these sort of subtle moments, but also take the risk, that these subtle moments could communicate, that we didn't have to overplay any of these dynamics.
I just wanted to add one thing about the music, which I so appreciate that you noticed. We loved working with Robert Ikiabri Lowe, our composer, and I think he's such a talented composer because he understands intuitively how to have a conversation with filmmakers as an artist. And this idea that like the observational mode, the first obvious thing it dispenses with is the interview-driven soundbite. And so for him, the first thing he dispensed with was the kind of the use of anthemic motif and was more interested in how his music could have like create a dialogue with the actual unfolding scenes. And so this idea that like in the production mode, we're trying to understand, and in the edit, of course, like how do we unlock cinematic space? I think something that he was thinking a lot about, it was how can the music also similarly kind of unlock like a dynamic and a nuance within these kind of very, very complex and easily oversimplified political and experiential moments. And so it was really an incredible treat to work with somebody like him because I think in the end, like he was thinking more about like the how important the absence of music was, right? And to create openings for just the filmmaking to exist on its own as well as like where his music complemented and augmented and contributed to a conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, too many of us forget that the absence of music creates a hunger so that when the music arrives, it has way more power because
Yeah.
we haven't had it. Yeah, I mean, watching the film again, I'm struck by its lyricism. It's funny, the scenes that like might be foregrounded scenes when I think about the movie are the intense scenes, the rallies or the vote counting or the arguments. But the film is also full of these lyrical, subtle, beautifully cinematic stretches, which we need. We need the pause between the super intense scenes. Otherwise, we're just going to be overwhelmed. And I just feel like you and your team, you crafted the valleys and the peaks of the storytelling beautifully to give us those reflective moments with different individuals, whether it's Chris or Natalie or whoever. And the film and the cinematography in those moments is just, I remember one shot, there's a shot on I think it's a bus where we're looking over people's shoulders and through, but the camera's aimed at the window and we're looking at like the refracted reflection of people's. It's pre-dawn, it's winter, people have coats on, and just that sense of melancholy and weariness and having to shoulder the labor. I just felt it all in that one beautiful shot. And the film is full of these shots. But the funny thing is when we think about your movie, we think of the intensity and the battle and more. So it was great to revisit it for that. Uh, I also love about your film, and I wonder if you could talk about this, the last act. So many of us might think, well, okay, the victory comes and it's time to wrap up the movie. It's like they won. But having now seen union battles in a number of contexts, you realize that a vote for a union is just the first step, and that trying to get a contract and fighting the company, which will do everything it can to avoid contract negotiations, all that becomes another huge, maybe even huger mountain to climb. And I love that your film shows us that, does not just wrap up quickly after the victory. But how were those discussions in the edit room? Were you editing vigorously already when they won? Did you already have a cut at that point, or like how did you come to realize no, we can't end it there. We have to go further and longer.
We had thanks for that. We had made that decision very early, I think out of a kind of knee-jerk anti-sentimentalism on our as you know as filmmakers, just knowing, I mean, Steve and I are interested in really complex subjects. We're interested in, political films that ask the hardest questions and try and find the form that enables, spending time with the most challenging questions, films that bury themselves in your head and you carry with you for weeks or months afterwards. So in some ways, we sort of could already predict that the ending of the election would be too easy, regardless of whether or not it was a win or a loss. I mean, and especially, knowing that it might be a loss. Like, we're not interested in, like that being the end of story. Oh, people tried something and then they didn't get it. And what's the lesson of that, right? So we had made that decision to keep filming after the victory. But the problem with that, of course, is that if you're not going to stop filming after the end of the election that you've been following, then when do you end? And so we did start editing shortly after the victory, which had lots of footage. So part of that stretch of time is just watching all this footage, but continued to film for quite a long time. And a lot of stuff was going on. I mean, namely, the union was falling apart. And we were covering a lot of complex dynamics and complex changes in the relationships. And so then, yeah, those were really challenging questions to deal with as a team because they weren't just aesthetic questions or narrative questions. They were also for us moral questions. What business do we have? This group of people has let us in, has granted us this incredible, access and trust. They trust us to be responsible, and we have footage of really hard, vulnerable moments. And how are we going to use that to say something that's meaningful to an audience that is, that is disparate? So there's going to be audience members that are also Amazon workers. There's going to be audience members that are, you know, professors in Sweden. Like the people are going to come to this film with a lot of different experiences, and what are we going to offer them that allows them to have a meaningful and useful um, and experiential, experience. I mean, that's to your point about these quiet moments. I mean, that's the power of cinema. You can say something like people are tired without having someone say people are tired. You can just be on this bus with the sound of those wheels, the darkness outside the window, and that communicates, as you say, weariness, and that's the magic of cinema. But yeah, I mean, we had to have, I think those were some of our best conversations, actually thinking about how the film would end. What is a way to say something true about the nature of organizing? And I think that the conclusion we sort of came to was that, what this film has to say about organizing is that it's really, really hard. It includes victories and losses, and yet it is everything. It is necessary. It's the only thing, the only way through this world. And I feel like we wanted to have an ending that is capacious enough to say that, but in a way that lets people sort of understand that and relate that to their own lives as well.
Absolutely. The film crackles with electricity often, and some of my favorite, like I'm amazed you have these moments, is in these captive audience meetings when you've got someone with their probably with their phone filming what happens in every union battle, which is that the company hires union avoidance consultants who come in and open up a well-worn playbook of messaging to shake people's belief in organizing and try to scare people or create uncertainty. That is that's what we never see. We never see this, whether it's a union, the UAW organizing in Alabama or Tennessee, wherever it is, any union campaign, they have this sort of anti-union playbook of messaging, and it's relentless. And the captive audience meetings that happen are relentless. And your film shows that. It's such an incredible contribution that your movie is making for the future of any union campaign. Anyone mounting a union struggle should watch this film because they're going to see how the company will what they will do in great specificity. And of course, I just love the fight back that the workers in the room are giving these consultants. It's just beautiful, beautiful to see. But including the footage, did you, I mean, I'm sure your legal team had knots in their stomach as you're thinking about including stuff like that. How did you figure all that out?
Yeah, I mean, we worked like a project like this, you have to obviously have a real strong legal team to vet and make sure that, we're protecting the workers and the organizers who've put so much on the line. So we were very careful to make sure everything was protected, both representationally on our end, but then also, within labor law, right? So Section 7 allows the organizers to document certain kinds of unfair labor practices. And when you think about like what is being filmed, I mean, it's like it's not often intangible ideas like capitalism can become personified, but that is a moment where this idea of capitalism, right, and all it seeks to protect and advance presents itself, right? This is like about protecting like a horrific turnover rate, horrifically dangerous working conditions, protecting companies from benefits and from having to pay out workers' comp, all sorts of things. So I think act of like documenting a very invisible, less visible moment was really the kudos have to go to the workers for doing that because they're the ones who granted us access to use that material.
Yeah. At what point did you show the film to the key folks who are in the film?
After we knew that we had a premiere date at Sundance, we knew that we had to show it to them all, and just to make sure that, for such a delicate subject and experience that they lived through, and the fact that we were there, I think the observational mode is like so powerful, and it's the one that I have like, for decades have connected with the most, and that's why I love your work so much. But it's also, what it creates is like a tremendous amount of unguarded moments being documented that I mean that is the outcome, right? You capture the thing that people don't get to see, and that most mainstream accounting of these sorts of events fail to take any interest in. And at the same time, I think there's a huge responsibility that we make sure, people feel fairly represented, even if it's discomforting in his representation. And to everyone's credit, I mean, we got almost no pushback on anything of importance to us. I think Chris wished the title could have been less generic and could be easily Googleable and look good on merchandise. So that was funny.
Yeah.
No, but it was, I mean, it was actually quite amazing to show everyone. We were nervous. You're always nervous to show your film to your participants. And, we hadn't picture locked yet because we wanted to safeguard, as Steve said, against like the possibility that we'd like really mess something up and someone felt really harmed by something. So we were leaving room for that. And this group of people had been through so much. Like they had forgotten, actually. This is like 2 years later, 3 years later, they had forgotten what they went through. They had forgotten the beginning. They'd forgotten some key moments. And I think it was actually just really, it was a hard and really also beautiful watch for them and great for us to experience them seeing how other people were seeing them. And I think it allowed them also to like feel again, a new sense of pride in what they had accomplishment. They'd almost forgotten what they'd accomplishment and how hard it was for them. And so that was really, really, I mean, we just feel like such a privileged experience to be able to have, maintain such a close relationship with them that they felt comfortable seeing that film and then coming to our premiere and being on stage as everybody watched it for the first time.
It's beautiful. I've been affirmed again and again making documentary that if a film feels fair and true to the experience of the people in it, that the people in it don't get overly protective of how they look or what they say. It's like I've been grateful, very, very grateful, and just affirmed that it's like people get it. The people in a film get it, that they're not going to be saints. We're all real people. We all say dumb stuff. And yet if the representation of our journey, our struggle, our story is fair and rich and complicated, then I'm okay if I said that dumb thing, or my hair looked bad. And that's for me, that's just wonderful. And it speaks to the real collaboration between people in a film and people behind the camera. So, it's good. And I just think you have made a great documentary that will be seen for years to come. And I just want to say thank you for that. And thank you for working so hard against so many odds to get the film out. If I just hope the film just keeps rolling out there in the world. We are obviously heading into turbulent times. The National Labor Relations Board, which makes labor law or doesn't make it, but enforces labor law in this country, is about to be in the hands of a new administration. It's going to be weakened, and I think your film is now more essential than it was when it came out a year ago. And so I just want to say thank you both for the film and also thank you for being here today. And thank you for watching this conversation with Steve Mang and Brett Story and their amazing film, Union.
Steve, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. And like Steve said, we've learned so much from you and Julia's work over the years, still continue to. So thank you. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Steve.